Everyone, welcome back to the second series where I'm talking about CPQ, where we're talking to vendors, getting a better grasp on what they offer, some of the benefits, and how they differentiate themselves from the market. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Joseph. Joseph, if you can, introduce yourself, tell the people your name, your role, your company, and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Edward. I appreciate being here. Thanks for inviting me into the podcast. Yeah, my name is Joe Harzewski, and I've been in and around CPQ for quite a while now. My background is such that I started in college with an engineering degree, a physics degree, and at one point I actually wanted to go to medical school, so I've got a lot of biology behind me as well. So I've studied the sciences. Throughout my career, I worked with a company called Vigilant Solutions, and it's with Vigilant Solutions, which was a license plate recognition company, that the current CPQ platform we're talking about, which is called Sales Run, was birthed and came to life. And it's been in development for a number of years. I've been very close to that. Our company, Vigilant Solutions, was acquired by Motorola Solutions, and sometime after that, we made a decision to take the property outside of Motorola Solutions and commercialize it for use as a CPQ across a number of different verticals in the IT world, aimed at mid level companies, most particularly manufacturers of those who have applied products. And so today, I'm the acting president and CEO of the Sales Runc company. We just received our first seed round of funding, so we're moving into our sales and marketing strategy and execution stage. So we're pretty excited about it.
Awesome. All right, Joe. So it seems like you've been around quite a bit, but maybe tell the people, why did you create Sales Run? Sort of what did you see missing in the CPQ market?
Actually, Edward, it's a good question. Uh, my experience with CPQ actually goes back into the 1990s, and I worked for Carrier Corporation as a commercial sales engineer. And throughout the tasks and duties and responsibilities that I had in the course of doing my job aimed at success in selling, we had a lot of applied products that we had to select. And we had very rough, archaic, old school, homegrown CPQ selection software. And of all the things that I did within my job and my responsibilities, the most difficult, painful task was that today a current CPQ helps and aids a salesperson through creating quotes, pricing complex products, and getting the information transaction data out to the customer to engage them into a sale and close for a purchase order. All of that work that's done in a CPQ today was where I spent most of my time as a junior salesperson. Going into Vigilant Solutions, which at the time was Vigilant Video, a license plate recognition company, I was named the vice president of sales and marketing and saw the same problem. My salespeople are spending way too much time in trying to create quotes, proposals, contracts, and there's a huge gap with sales orders. And I took my painful knowledge from Carrier Corporation and thought, I don't want to go through this again. And so it was there that we looked for a CPQ. And at the time, we couldn't find a satisfactory CPQ. And we were in the business of developing software. So I got the funding approved to start developing a CPQ software, which at that time was a homegrown quoting tool, which most people are familiar with. And that grew and grew over time into the CPQ that we have today called Sales Run.
So, in your opinion, why do you think companies get CPQ wrong with Sales Run? You showed me earlier a little bit about what it does. Can you kind of explain why do you think companies miss the mark on CPQ?
Well, I think that CPQ is an underdeveloped marketing category, and I don't think that users really understand what they expect, or I don't think that manufacturers understand the true needs of sales teams, especially at the enterprise level. And I think that organizations such as SAP or Salesforce CRM or a couple of the others CRM such as HubSpot. They've made it really easy to for one of their existing customers to buy into the CPQ platform that they have, which really is a way of being able to jumble together some SKUs and get it onto a sheet of paper that might look a little bit like a quote and get it out the door. And so it's in my opinion a little bit of a lower grade answer to helping a salesperson get their job done, but it's really not what these organizations need. And in our experience, in my own personal experience, the true need is a single sales application that salespeople can more or less live in and spend their time in, generating the transactions that they need to create the dollars that make the engine flow. And I don't think that there's a lot of good, I should say good. I don't think that there's a lot of options for CPQ applications that are advanced. And I think what drives that is that each sales organization goes to market a different way. And it becomes very difficult to make a mainstream product that can fit a number of different sales organizations that all have different thought process on how to sell the product. As a clear example of the complexities that we see in pricing, one day a VP of sales wakes up and says, hey, you know what? I want to order this configuration, or I want to allow this configuration, this part, this warranty, this service, put it all together and let's have a special for $9.95 and go out and have the sales team sell it. That becomes very difficult for any piece of software to handle. And when you have those types of thought processes against a number of different sales organizations in different directions, how do you find a product that's applicable across all those verticals with all those scenarios? Then you start to throw in hardware as a service, and the problem becomes even more complicated. So I think that there's a lack of understanding on the CPQ vendor's part as to what these sales organizations really need to find a deep level of success and a high level of efficiency.
Great. Yeah. So, Joe, I think maybe put yourself in the customer's shoes from your expertise, from your opinion. Let's say I'm a company, I have a need for CPQ. Business is booming, but we're missing the mark. There's a lot of bottlenecks. Okay. And then I enter the vendor process. Okay. I need to select the right vendor. What sort of advice would you give this customer on deciding which CPQ to choose from?
It's a great question. How do you select a CPQ? And I think that there's a few factors that a sales organization has to consider. First of all, is it a good fit? And a good fit means, will my salespeople be able to use the application and generate a return on their time investment? Because at the end of the day, the biggest return on investment that CPQ offers, I think, is time. Getting a person through that workflow in the quickest, most efficient way so they're not spending their time in a sales software. The next piece is related to mistakes and errors. Is the application going to be flexible enough to manage the products that I have? And I'll tell you, Edward, in the deployments that we've had, when you go and deploy a CPQ that is poses a good value proposition, it really requires that the end customer understands their own business to a pretty good degree. And understanding their business will help them figure out what CPQ to select based on the mechanics and the dynamics of their business. We've walked into businesses and asked the basic questions: what's the cost basis for this selection or that selection? And they don't know. They don't understand their own costs. Without understanding that, you really can't understand what kind of a CPQ you need and what the capabilities are. If you know your business, then it's a little bit easier to look at a CPQ and say, this has a series of configurators, or this company has the wherewithal to build at a reasonable market rate price the configurators that we need and the pricing structure that we need to take our business into the marketplace and commercially succeed. Now, I want to talk on the other side of that, where I think that some folks mostly get it wrong. When they go to market with a CPQ, they become beholden to, well, that's what the CPQ can do. And they don't take the time to select or find the CPQ that can truly meet their needs. And when you're in a position of investing the amount of money that we're seeing invested in some of these other competitive CPQ applications, and you find yourself in the world of, well, I can't do it any differently, and I can only do what my system lets me do. It's that it's that statement that no one wants to hear. Well, it's the system, it's not me. That avoiding that and making sure you understand your business so you can avoid that pitfall and trap really is helpful in selecting a CPQ. Does that kind of help answer the question?
Yeah, I think it's great you pointed out this is what to do and this is what not to do. I think both are great advice. So let's say I'm a customer, I've met with all these vendors, I met with the big guys and met with all these guys, and then they said, hey, we want to do business with Sales Run. So they sign on, and what should that customer expect the first maybe few months be working with Sales Run?
It's a good question. And again, it goes really back to a point that we were a little bit dumbfounded about, and that's that some companies really don't understand their own business. They have to understand their business to enter into a CPQ that offers a lot of value, because a CPQ ultimately can be a little bit like a marriage in the sense that it's going to run your business. And if you do the right, if you evaluate correctly and you make a strong selection for the CPQ that fits your needs, you will get a lot of value out of it. You'll get a lot of return out of it, but it will be like a marriage in the sense that you're going to be locked into the CPQ because there's so many features and benefits you're going to pull out of it. And so, in thinking, I kind of like to model the CPQ like this. It's kind of like selecting a house and moving into a house. If you pick the wrong house and you look back, you've spent a lot of time getting into the house, setting up the house, making sure that you understand how the house operates, and you become comfortable in the house. If you have to leave that house, it's a lot of work. So the first thing is you want to make sure that you're moving into the right house. Once you move into that house, what do you really expect? Well, with the CPQ, in our case, it's a function of how much is going to be deployed, how quickly, how much do you have ready to dive in? Do you have all your SKUs available? Do you understand all of the options of your software? Is your engineering team in sync with the current product offering? Do you have an existing framework and a pathway for the engineers to be able to make changes in the products that are being sold as they're being changed, or as the product is evolving or obsoleting, or any part thereof? And all those are critical factors. But generally, what we see is that most of the products that our customers have will fit into one of our off-the-shelf configurators, and we go through the drill of making sure we understand their products, and then we plug those into our configurators. There's a little bit more length of time associated with developing a configurator, developing a version of the configurator that's slightly different, that better meets the needs of the customer. There can be a little bit of delay there, but generally speaking, it's on the product side, it's how well are you prepared to enter your data into a system in detail. And at the end of the day, really, Edward, the fundamental data is always the same across all configurators. It's an SKU or a option selection with an associated cost, an associated sell price impact, and associated description. And those 4 points constitute fundamentally what every CPQ is built upon. Once you get past the product configurators, which is not hard to do if you're a prepared company, it could be as little as a couple of weeks to, some small number of months. But once you get past that piece of it, Then there's your documentation, because in today's world, we want to virtually engage our buyers. And the way that we virtually engage our buyers is to offer and surround the quotation with additional documentation, brochures, videos, case studies, different elements that allow the user to come to the conclusion of, yes, I want to buy from this company. Yes, I want to buy this product. And that's always an emotional decision. So a strong CPQ will allow the virtual engagement components that are necessary to be successful in that virtual engagement. And that means you have to be ready with your documentation. In our case, Sales Runc has a fully established library where you would connect or load up all of your documentation, so that documentation can be used uh, to integrate with the quote or the proposal in order to drive that virtual engagement. There needs to be a good CRM plan. If you have a good CRM plan, then it's a very quick connection to your CRM with our off the shelf controls and mapping. We have a full mapping utility that allows you to map the data exchange between the CRM in terms of all your customer data, as well as all of the high level quote and proposal data that goes back to the CRM for reporting purposes, including managing the updating of the primary forecast metrics that are in a CRM, such as uh, the I'm drawing a blank. I'm sorry. Such as the close date, the opportunity status, the probability of close, and the value of the opportunity. If you have a good CRM plan and your CRM is organized, that piece of it is very quick as well. 1 to 2 weeks, and we're connected to your CRM and exchanging data in full duplex to be able to ensure that you've got data going up to the CRM and you've got data coming down to the CPQ. That's a very important part. Depending on the complexities of your ordering side, the ERP is a very similar story. It's data going into your ERP after you finalize a sales order in Sales Runc and pushing that data into your ERP based on the way that your ERP is set up. So there's the connection of the other IT components, CRM and ERP. There's the configurators, and there's the documentation library where we store or connect to your documentation to infuse. There's a lot of other components we could talk about, but those are the primary pieces that we set up upon boarding. And we can get through that if the company's prepared in as little as a few weeks. And if they're not prepared, then we have to help them go through and understand their business. And many times it becomes a big value for them because they have to take a look at certain aspects of their business that they truly didn't understand before we came along. And it was like make up for Peter with Paul, or functioning in the gray area. So that can throw some delays on it. But ultimately, it's a number of weeks, not a number of years or 1 or 2 year expedition. It's a matter of coordinating data and making sure that the data exchange takes place between the other IT components. And then there's the last piece of training, which in our case, we've launched to several companies that have done hundreds of millions of dollars in transactions and never even did the first training session. And that's another really important part, going back to your last question about selecting a CPQ software. If you're looking at an interface that you don't understand and you're a salesperson and you're embedded into the typical sales process, then I wouldn't think that it's a good idea to expect that all your other sales underlings are going to understand that as well. And we see a lot of UIs that are very confusing, that don't make a lot of sense according to the workflows of most sales organizations. And the key suggestion there is, when you're getting in a CPQ, evaluate the UI. Is it easy enough that I can see the pathway through without a lot of time being spent to learn, therefore minimizing the learning curve? Because as a sales organization, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be faced with turnover, where I'm going to Some salespeople are going to move up. Some salespeople are going to move sideways. Some salespeople are going to move away. And there's going to be new people coming in to replace those salespeople. And if I'm doing a good job and I have a good product and I'm running a good business, I'm going to expand my salespeople. And the last thing you want is to have a burden of trying to figure out how to get those folks trained. We feel confident that we can launch our application with zero training to sales users. In other words, if I gave you a login and said, hey, go select this product and create a quote, if you had any level of sales experience in the past, you'd be able to get through the application workflow and create a bona fide quote without any training whatsoever. You wouldn't know all the ins and outs, but you'd be able to get from the beginning to the end with no problem in a relatively short learning curve on your own. Does that help?
Yeah, it helps pretty good. I think you mentioned CRM and ERP integrations. Is that something that Sales Run handles out of the box, or is there some additional work that needs to be done?
And that's a good question, Edward. Thanks for that. The CRM, we have a application component called CRM Connect, and we have basically a plug into all the major CRMs: HubSpot, Salesforce, SAP CRM. There's a number of them. And that is completely off the shelf. If there's any additional work that we needed to do, it's typically documented well by the CRM company, and we can uplift the controls on the Sales Run side. And so, absolutely, the CRM is off the shelf, standard plug for most CRMs, and if not, we cut, paste, and modify to fit the new CRM. So that's pretty straightforward for us. On the ERP side, it gets a little bit more complex because what we see is there's a different method of operations that take place with the CRM. And that's a function of what data are you putting into your ERP and what data are you managing through your ERP and what data are you hosting somewhere else. So, for example, we have an all-encompassing sales order module where the sales order module lets the sales team complete the sales order to automatically push to the ERP. We need to make sure that all the fields that you're tracking in that ERP for that sales order entry are there. Typically, we find that we have them all covered, but there are other fields that you may not want to track or have incoming. Let's say, for example, payment terms, pre-negotiated payment terms. Good example. Some ERPs will take that from a stored CRM value. Other ERPs will have it loaded directly into the ERP. Others will accept it from a CPQ. So there's a little bit of, I don't want to say custom programming or customization, but there is a little bit of adjustment that we seem to do for every ERP. And that ERP connection can also be require a little bit of work when it comes to what do the approvals look like on the side of the ERP. In other words, we've seen organizations that will allow their salesperson or their sales team, or more importantly, their order fulfillment group to approve a sales order. And if the sales order is approved, it's solidified and becomes a ready to fulfill entity in the company's roster. So other organizations will allow that to take place in another application such as a CPQ, but when it hits the ERP, then there becomes a new line of checks and balances against the exterior data related to the product. And under those conditions, we can end up doing a little bit of extra work to make sure that we get a good flow to the customer. As an example, a ERP officer could sit back and say, "Hey, I need to put this on hold. They're on credit term hold, or they're on credit hold right now. I need to put this on hold." And then what happens if during that hold time there's a change in the product? That's a good example of what we run into and how we have to manage for that company. So some extra work involved in the ERP Connect, but not as much as the CRM. Hope that answers it.
Thank you. Yeah, that answered pretty well. I think so. Maybe Joseph, if you can kind of tell us a little bit more about the structure of Sales Run. So the Sales Run do all of the implementation, or do you guys work with partners? How does that work with Sales Run?
Yeah, another good question. In terms of our implementation, we have a team of folks that handle that internally. So we do that. We have not opened it up to partners yet. We hope to at some point, or we plan to at some point. But I think we're still in the early growth side to be able to push that out to partners. We know the application best and we know how to get it done fast. And we know with our customers that the last thing we want to do is slow them down and have a dragged on implementation because information's passing back and forth, or there's a knowledge base gap, or some other critical factor that's holding things up. So we've elected at this point to do it ourselves. And so we handle everything from soup to nuts, the configurators, the data loading, the data exchange, the connections in to the ERP and CRM, as well as the training.
So Joseph, I don't know if you've been hearing stuff on the news or the internet, but there's been this thing called AI that's been sort of disrupting a lot of technologies, a lot of industries,
Yeah.
right? And I think in our industry, CPQ, it's going to disrupt it as well, you know. And I guess I want to maybe get your point of view on maybe AI conceptually in CPQ, and what do you feel about it? And then maybe give us an idea of how you see AI being used in Sales Run.
Sure. And I think that there's a few different answers there. I think that right now, our most advanced AI implementation is on the development side. And that's to be able to help us cut our core costs in developing when we need to develop something specific for a customer for their particular instance of Sales Run, or just the general evolution of the application. Because as we continue to drive our costs down, we pass that cost savings back to the customer. And today, implementation of a CPQ in many other companies is a very, very high price. And we're trying to change that in the marketplace. So I think that first and foremost, it's driving down our development costs by using AI aided and AI agent based development work. The next thing is to be able to allow other AI tools and AI engines to autonomously work with the CPQ framework itself and be able to make that connect our application to any of the AI tools out there, whether that be ChatGPT or Grok or uh, all of the majors through an API. So then you have that access to your org through your particular AI channel. And then I think where the value comes in to working with the sales team and really providing value as part of the product is being able to start to offer insights into the process, identify and communicate in an agentic basis what are the upsell opportunities that the salesperson could have. When there is complex pricing, I think that there's a lot to be had for guidance through complex pricing, competitive quotes, and even more importantly, when you get into the bid spec world and you have to place and generate a response against a complex bid spec, that can take a lot of time, and that's easily handled by an AI agent. And so I think those are the primary places. And as we continue to go further, I think that it's our hope and intention that we deploy AI to the point where the salesperson is a lot more hands off in a CPQ and can basically use human textual ideas and get back a full blown proposal without even having to click through the workflow. I don't think that AI will ever replace a CPQ, but I think it will drastically cut down the workload and the time spent in a CPQ. And so when you look at the evolution, you've got spreadsheets and Word docs that then goes to a SKU management tool that then goes to a real professional CPQ, then goes to an AI driven CPQ where the user has very few inputs and just make some basic decisions on what the output needs to be. And you've gone from a mammoth amount of work in the enterprise sales org with applied product selling to a very narrow window of work. And what does that do for you? In some cases, that hands back, costs and dollars to the organization's bottom line. But I think that those companies that are a little bit wiser and want to really continue to invest in their sales organization, take those same dollars and spin them into additional resources so they can do even more selling. And so there's a lot to be had from AI, and I think there's a lot of benefit. And I don't think anybody really knows at this stage where it's going to land, other than our world is going to be very different tomorrow than it is today than it was yesterday.
Absolutely. And if you guys wanna, this is a little shameless plug. Screw it, I'm gonna do it. If you guys wanna see my take on AI, just go in my profile. I have a few videos of me sort of giving my 2 cents. Won't give them here, but take a look
Sure.
when you got a chance. And I think you mentioned to me that CPQ isn't a good size industry. It's a good size market, but it's not one of the larger markets. Do you see CPQ growing in the future? Or do you see it sort of stagnant or even shrinking? What's your
No,
take on that?
I believe I've got every reason to believe that CPQ is going to grow. And I think when I look at the marketplace and IT softwares, I look at CRM, and I believe CRM is the 35 plus $billion market just in the US alone. And I look at the other side, SAP, or excuse me, ERP, and having SAP been leading that for many years, ERP businesses, I think in the mid 40s, if not, heading north towards the 50s, 50 billion dollar market space in just the US alone. Those are reasonable numbers to enjoy in any market space. And the reality is that the CPQ is very, very small. I think it's less than $2 billion right now in the US. And while it's a small market, I sit back and say, well, geez, this is the most this is the most critical part of any sales organization, is being able to get the quote matched to a customer PO. And all of that, there's so much chaos that takes place in the workflow of a salesman, and so many different things happen, and there's no software guiding this. And what software you see guiding it absolutely stops at the quote and the purchase order. And then there's this big huge abyss on the other side of the purchase order to try to get to the ERP where things can actually be ordered and ultimately invoiced, which is really the end goal. And so I sit back and I think, well, why is there this big abyss after the purchase order? And why aren't there software applications that tailor the salesperson's needs and make that process and workflow super efficient? And I think the answer is that it goes back to the complexities of creating a tool that can span and adapt across so many different mindsets that take place in each of the different sales orgs across the different verticals. It's very hard to create a generic tool. And I don't think that any one company has done a great job at defining what the CPQ market category needs to be. And I think that that's the mission that we're on. We're on a mission to be able to bring a good, solid value proposition at a reasonable price into the IT market that fits between the CRM and the ERP, and covers the gap of what salespeople do. Today, CRMs such as Salesforce, HubSpot, and others have done a fantastic job at being able to guide the pathway of a salesperson in terms of thinking about the process. but in my opinion, the job is not anywhere near well as done regarding the actual selection, pricing, and documentation that you've got to get out to get a job done, let alone what documents need to come in and the process that happens post PO to set the stage for downstream operations, anywhere from ERP to field services. And so all of those things have a big, huge gap from the PO onward, and that chaos that takes place during the sales the sales workflow is not well managed by a lot of CPQs. So I think that we have a good opportunity here to grow the marketplace, and I think that most companies, they don't want spreadsheets and Word documents anymore. They want things to be data based. We live in a world where you should be able to put your finger on any number of metrics for your business and not have to go rummaging through 10 different people's emails to be able to get the data that you need. And unfortunately, a lot of enterprise sales organizations still function and fumble in that space. So I think that we have all the indicators that we want to see in the marketplace that tell us that this vertical is going, or that this particular industry is going to grow, and there's a lot of room to grow and a lot of room to expand if we can define the category correctly and show customers the problems that we can solve that they didn't even understand fully that were there to begin with.
Not to old shame anybody. I'm not an ageist, but the definitely like the older people in the industry, they tend to really love their spreadsheets. They love their little folder on their desktop, but they don't like to share that folder. And I think that's where you get a lot of problems with the new guys coming in or the new girls. And CPQ can solve that for you. Like what Joe said, it's just a database that you can access, and you can really do some really cool stuff. So I think Joe, you told us some good stuff about CPQ. Now I want you to give us your hottest, your spiciest take. So can you tell us maybe the biggest lie about CPQ that you hear, whether it be from your peers or or maybe from LinkedIn?
I think that the biggest lie is that CPQ is expensive and only for big companies. And I think that when you look at some of the ways that Deloitte goes to market with Oracle CPQ and takes the Oracle database and builds a plate and treats that as an underground database and pipelines data entries to the surface and goes and builds a massive playground on top of the surface and calls it a CPQ. I think that when you go through that multi-million-dollar adventure that can be anywhere from starting in the low, $3 to $5 million range and going up, upwards of $50 million over the course of a few years. I think that that's a real turnoff for a lot of mid-size organizations and for certain smaller organizations. And I think that that doesn't need to be the case. I think that our application, in terms of its core capacity, can serve any of the smaller organizations just as well as any of the Fortune 500 companies in terms of what they need in the sales workflows. And we're not charging tens of millions of dollars to access our software. So we're changing the game in that sense. But I think that one of the biggest lies is it needs to be a lot of work. I think the other big lie that I hear is it needs to be a science project. There's a lot of articles written that say if you're going to get into a CPQ, it is a big science project. It's going to take a lot of work. And my answer to that is no, it doesn't have to be that way. It can be that way if you want it to be that way as a customer, but it doesn't have to be that way. And certainly we don't want it to be that way. And we've done everything we can within our development power to provide tools to prevent it from being that way. And so it goes back to the onboarding process. If you understand your business, we'll get you boarded fast, and it's not a science project. We don't have to go through hours and hours of meetings and scheduling with a global system integrator or some other large integrator that has to take all the feedback about your product and sit back and lay out some master grand plan about how they're going to develop all of the application tools that you need, which is what the larger, more enterprise CPQ scenarios look like. It doesn't have to be that way. So I think that that's another great lie that goes with it.
All right. A lot of hot takes there. So I think, Joe, you mentioned you have some exciting stuff going on entering next year. You have some, you know, you received some funding, and can you kind of tell the good folks what should they expect from Sales Run going into next year?
Well, with Sales Run, we're doing it. We're investing our money in a number of different places with the product itself. What we'd like to do, and I think one of our more forward thinking application components is to be able to drive our PO submission process through the standard selling as well as the reseller channel extension that we have. Our reseller extension channel allows for a manufacturer or any company that's selling applied products that has channel distribution to be able to also have its child account to be able to quote their own products underneath that manufacturer or that particular that sales organization. So it's easy to extend the CPQ out to the resellers. We also have this application component called Submit PO that allows the end user customer to review the quote or proposal and or contract and submit a purchase order against a contract through the Sales Run portal. And when that takes place, all of the order data is automatically served up to the customer for verification. They can verify what order information that is correct or not correct and make corrections as needed, particular to that job. That flows back into the Sales Run application. And with that data flowing back into the Sales Run, you now have automated sales orders that are almost ERP ready, and most particularly waiting only for company approval. And we have a full approval process on our sales orders before they go to the ERP. And so the reality is, not only are we bringing forth ways for companies to submit purchase orders through the Sales Run portal, but we're also using that data as well as the CRM data and putting together orders to automate sales orders. So a salesperson can make their way through the quote process or proposal process now in minutes versus hours, or even in some cases days. And once that shoots out and they go run off and do their selling somewhere else and come back, you've got a sales order that's ready with an integrated purchase order and a series of guided guided sales order steps to complete the process. And now 80% of your sales order work is done. So we're automating all aspects of the project. And I think that that's going to be a really good feature for our customers moving forward into next year, along with some of the earlier conversation AI components that we have related to how we're going to implement AI. Our focus next year is continuing to be AI implementation and automation of all process. Our goal is to be able to get the user from point A to point B, that is product sale inception to ERP ready downstream PO support from point A to point B in the quickest, most efficient, automated manner as we can, and do that at the most relatively or the lowest cost to our customer as we can offer. So those are our goals moving into 2026.
Right. A lot of information. So for the people who want to know more about Sales Run, whether that be they just want to connect with you or they want to maybe possibly schedule a demo, what is the best way for them to sort of stay in contact with Sales Run, and then also what is the best way to stay in contact with you?
Okay, great. Good question, Edward. We'd love to talk to anybody that wants to learn more about our CPQ or CPQ in general. As it stands, we're also in the process of developing our second edition of what to expect from a CPQ. which is very expansive on what we believe that customers should get from a CPQ. And you can use that as a litmus test against anybody's CPQ. It really is a map for how do I select my CPQ and what should a CPQ contain and what should I be looking for. Anyways, that's coming out as well. But if there were any folks that wanted to get in touch with me directly, just email me anytime. It's joe.harzewski at salesrun.com, and I'll be happy to follow up and schedule a time where we could talk.
You heard it here, guys. So, Joe, thanks for joining. As always, it's always fun to learn about what's going on in the CPQ space, and I'm looking forward to staying in touch and seeing some of the cool stuff that you guys do.
Edward, thanks very much for having me. I appreciate it. And as always, make it a great day.
All right, guys. Till next time.